The ballroom was chaos dressed in crystal and gold. Screams ricocheted off the high ceilings of the Fairmont Grand in San Francisco, a place that normally hosted charity galas and tech mogul weddings. But today it was a battlefield in heels and tuxedos. Men in black tactical gear moved with frightening precision, weaving between overturned champagne flutes and abandoned purses. I stood motionless at the edge of the room, the faint hum of my earpiece connecting me to a command center miles away. The team leader, helmeted, anonymous, strode past my shrieking family and stopped right in front of me. He ignored the shouting, the crying, the chaos. His voice was low but carried the weight of authority. "Falcon, confirmation received. All targets are being secured." He waited for my order. Just 10 minutes earlier, the only sound had been the sweet swell of a string quartet. I'd been sitting in the front row, another silent extra in the Broadway production of my older sister's life. And there she was, Rachel, the family's untouchable golden child, gliding down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang gown. As she passed, her smile cut like broken glass. "Still playing soldier, Emily," as she murmured, just loud enough for our parents to hear. "Glad you could take a day off from your little army desk job." My parents, ever the masters of polite appearances, smiled at me with that same pitying tilt of the head they'd been perfecting since I was 17. I returned the expressionless look I'd trained myself to wear, the one I'd used through every slight, every family holiday where I was their quirky one with the strange career. It went in my mental ledger, right next to the time they missed my commissioning ceremony at Fort Benning because Rachel had a weekend spa retreat, and the countless moments they'd called my intelligence work a phase or a hobby. Up at the altar, Rachel's groom, Ethan Carlson, flashed a politician's smile. His father, Robert Carlson, stood beside him, a man whose handshake felt like ice and whose eyes told me there was far more to his business than his country club charm. They leaned toward each other and spoke in what they thought was a private language, coded phrases wrapped in casual tones. They didn't know that I, Captain Emily Hayes, had spent the last 6 years as one of the top signals analysts for U.S. Army intelligence, specializing in Eastern European networks. I understood every word they were saying. Package confirmed. Mechanism delivered. It wasn't just small talk. It was the final signal in an 18-month investigation into the Carlsons' role in trafficking restricted weapons components through shell companies in the US and abroad. The last green light I needed for Operation Iron Veil, an interagency sting that could wipe out half of their network in a single day. Rachel's little dig about my desk job, it was meant to humiliate me. She had no idea that she was walking directly into the center of a military operation. To understand the calm in my voice when I finally gave the order, you'd need to know about the 2 lives I'd been living. In one, I was the invisible younger daughter, a walking disappointment to a family obsessed with appearances. In the other, I was Falcon, a senior intelligence officer trusted with some of the most sensitive national security operations in the hemisphere. The first life judged me by whether I showed up with a date to Thanksgiving. The second life judged me by whether my analysis saved lives. 6 months earlier, the first life had smirked at me across a candlelit table in Napa Valley during Rachel's engagement dinner. Ethan had arrived with a rare bourbon for my father, instantly buying his approval, and a designer handbag from my mother, who gasped like she'd won the lottery. Rachel's announcement that she'd been promoted to senior vice president at her marketing firm was met with a standing ovation from our parents. Me. I had just returned from a 72-hour mission assisting in the intercept of encrypted communications between a Serbian smuggler and a known U.S. supplier. I tried to share a small piece of it. I actually just finished a successful intel project this week. But my father patted my hand and said, That's nice. But look at Rachel, making things happen in the real world. That was their world. A world where my medals and commendations didn't matter because they couldn't hang them on a living room wall for guests to admire. The other world, my real world, was a secure room buried in a classified facility outside Arlington, Virginia. No windows. Cold air. 6 monitors streaming encrypted chatter, satellite imagery, and suspicious financial flows. This was where I first spotted Ethan Carlson's name buried in a data packet flagged by the Department of Homeland Security. It took weeks to follow the threads, to confirm that the Carlsons were quietly brokering black market weapons deals under the cover of real estate developments. And when Rachel announced her engagement, the timeline snapped into place. Ethan's wedding wasn't just a family event, it was a smokescreen for their final handoff. By the time my team pieced it together, I knew I would be at that wedding no matter what, not as a sister, but as an officer on mission. The day after Rachel's engagement dinner, I sat in my Arlington office, a secure space inside a sensitive compartmented information facility, SCIF, staring at a digital wedding invitation Ethan's mother had sent my parents. Cream cardstock and gold script scanned into a PDF, with the date and venue circled in cheerful red. It wasn't just to save the date. To me, it was a deadline. Colonel Mark Jensen, my commanding officer, stood behind me, arms folded. Jensen wasn't a man who wasted words or offered comfort. He'd seen my analysis, and I could tell by the way his jaw tightened that he believed every word of it. "Walk me through it again, Falcon," he said. I pointed to a line of metadata on my primary monitor. Encrypted messages between Ethan Carlson and a known broker in Houston have spiked in the past 6 weeks. The last exchange includes code we've confirmed from other arms trafficking operations. The date embedded in the packet matches the wedding weekend. Sir, this isn't a coincidence. They're planning to finalize the transfer under the cover of that event. Jensen studied the data, his expression unreadable. Then, with a short nod, "Your calls have been accurate before. If you're certain, build the op." That was all the permission I needed. The operations outline came together in my head as I spoke. He will coordinate with the FBI's Counterproliferation Center, DHS, and a joint Arma CID task force. We'll need Interpol involved. The Carlsons' partners have foreign ties. The venue will be treated as a hot zone. The goal is to capture every principal actor in one sweep without civilian casualties. Jensen didn't flinch. "Name it." "Operation Iron Veil," EI said. That was the moment the mission became official. I walked out of his office with the classified proposal folder tucked under my arm, knowing the decision I'd just made would fracture my family in ways that could never be undone. Over the next weeks, I played the role of the eager little sister. I called my mother, pretending I wanted to help with wedding planning. "Could you send me the guest list?" I asked sweetly. "I just want to know who's coming so I can help with seating charts." She was thrilled, and emailed it without a second thought. Back in the SCIF, I ran every single name through classified watch lists. The document lit up with red flags, known traffickers, shell company CEOs, 2 foreign nationals already under sealed indictment. Each a family friend or a business associate, was another link in the Carlsons chain. We pulled high-res satellite imagery of the Fairmorn Grand, marking service entrances, security camera blind spots, and helicopter landing zones. I worked with DHS agents to map exactly where tactical teams could enter without alerting guests. At night, when the office emptied and the world outside was quiet, I sat alone at my desk going over every scenario. My military training drilled one rule into me: the op had to be airtight. Failure didn't just mean a few arrests missed, it could mean dozens of stolen weapons components reaching the black market. 3 weeks before the wedding, I made one last attempt to warn my family, for their safety if nothing else. I called my mother again, keeping my tone professional. "Mom, I think Rachel's fiancé has some dangerous business connections. Maybe it would be wise to delay the wedding." She sighed, that same long-suffering sound I've been hearing since high school. "Emily, you're always suspicious of people. The army has made you paranoid. Rachel finally found someone successful, someone who treats her like a queen. Please, just try to be happy for her." It was the final confirmation I needed. They wouldn't listen. I hung up knowing the divide between us was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a wall. They preferred the illusion of stability over the truth, and illusions don't survive tactical raids. The morning of the wedding, my uniform hung neatly in my closet, untouched. Instead, I wore a deep blue silk dress, civilian attire, but with one small modification. Pinned to my left shoulder was a silver brooch that had belonged to my grandmother. Inside its delicate filigree hid a miniature encrypted microphone linked directly to my earpiece. The Fairmorn Grand glittered with chandeliers and floral arrangements worth more than my first car. Guests laughed over champagne, blissfully unaware that the room had been mapped, scanned, and classified by 3 different agencies. My family greeted me with polite indifference, seating me at the far edge of the family table. My father leaned over with a smirk. "We're saving the seat next to you for when you finally bring a real date, Em." I smiled thinly, adding it to the ledger. When the ceremony began, I locked away the part of me that cared about being the ignored sister. The soldier in me took control. My senses sharpened, my focus narrowed to the men standing at the altar. Robert Calson stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. I saw his lips from the words I'd been waiting 18 months to hear. Package confirmed. Mechanism delivered. I exhaled once, softly, and turned my head just enough to speak into the brooch. "Command, this is Falcon. Iron Vale is live. I repeat, Iron Vale is live." Somewhere outside, the city moved on, unaware that the countdown had begun. The quartet swelled toward its final cadence. Crystal light trembled across the ballroom, as if the chandeliers knew what was coming. I kept my breathing even, eyes forward, shoulders loose. A bridesmaid dabbed at happy tears. 2 rows back, an investor in a midnight tux checked his watch, bored. None of them saw the invisible line that had just been crossed. In my ear, the net came alive, clean, clipped voices stitched together by years of training. Team Alpha set. North Service Corridor Green. Bravo stacked. Stairwell 2. Cameras looped. Charlie in catering. Gas ovens cold. Safeties confirmed. Command copies. Execute on Falcon's mark. I let my gaze drift as if admiring the flowers. In truth, I was checking angles. Primary exits, 2. Secondary, 3. Tertiary, the kitchen loading dock and a locked terrace door leading to a narrow fire escape. A woman in an emerald dress blocked the aisle with an elaborate train. Good, that would slow any rush. The officiant smiled his practiced, pastoral smile. Rachel squeezed Ethan's hands and looked out over the room, luminous. Even now, a sting of grief tugged at me. The small, stubborn hope that I wouldn't have to be the person I had become. But the word delivered still rang in my head like a bell. The mechanism existed. Somewhere close. I rolled my shoulder, felt the cool weight of the brooch, and spoke. Mark. The change was almost polite. The double doors at the back opened, not flung, not slammed, opened with purpose. Dark figures moved in a tide, Interpol and federal jackets cutting through satin and rumour. Conversations snapped to silence, then shattered into shouts. The quartet faltered into a single wrong note that hung in the air like a question, then died. Alfred took the aisle, fanning past relatives frozen in glittering disbelief. Bravo split left, securing the balcony and sightlines. Charlie flowed from catering like a shadow and sealed the kitchen, 2 agents posting on the dock. The first screams rose, high and thin, as guests stood. Then sat, then stood again without choosing. Robert Calson reacted like a professional, just a fraction too slow. He turned to sweep Ethan behind him, eyes searching for the north corridor. An agent met him halfway, motion crisp, voice steady. Hands. Now. Zip ties whispered. Another agent took Ethan, who tried to protest and sagged instead, the oxygen leaving him as if a valve had been closed. My father stumbled to his feet, fury chasing colour up his neck. Who is in charge? What is this circus? My daughter is. He didn't finish, because the team leader cut cleanly through the noise and stopped 3 feet in front of me. He was tall, the kind of tall that read as inarguable. Black helmet, reflective visor up. I could see the crowd reflected in the shield's rim, panicked pearls, a child crying, someone filming despite a buddy tugging at her sleeve. Falcon, he said, voice steady enough to anchor the room. Primary targets secured. Secondary list in progress. We have control of all ingress and egress. Your orders? The word landed like a stone in a still pond, ripples of realization moving row by row. I felt my mother's stare hit the side of my face, felt my father's outrage hesitate, scramble, then lose its footing. At the altar, Rachel's bouquet drooped. The petals had started to shake. I didn't look at them. Secure the perimeter. I want the groom suite, the family lounge, and the AV control room cleared and swept. Hard drives first. Nobody leaves without ID. Copy. He pivoted away, voice already on a different channel, and the room began to move again, purpose replacing chaos like a new song bleeding in over an old one. A few guests sank into their chairs and clung to each other. Others did the math a little faster and kept very still with their hands visible. A ring bearer started to sob. An agent knelt and whispered something kind. The sobbing softened to hiccups. I walked the center aisle. People peeled back instinctively, unsure whether to hate me or ask for my protection. The carpet yielded under my heels, soft and expensive and faintly sticky with spilled champagne. Halfway to the altar I stopped, eyes on Robert. He had regained a sliver of composure, the boardroom mask coming down like a fire curtain. You've made a mistake, he said, the husk of charm threaded through his tone. We are very well connected. So am I said, and nodded to the agent at AV. He keyed his radio. The projection screen behind the altar bloomed to life, wedding slideshow interrupted by a new feed, mirrored copies of encrypted chats, ledger fragments, time-stamped warehouse stills in Oakland and Galveston, a geotagged image of a steel case in the trunk of a black SUV parked under the Fairmont's loading dock ramp 43 minutes earlier. The case dimensions matched through a mechanism in 3 separate intercepts. In the corner of the screen, a small red dot pulsed over a floor plan. Groom suite, closet B. Robert's mouth closed. Rachel's gaze ping-ponged between me and the screen. Emily, she whispered, voice feathered with terror. What is this? What did you do? I could have answered a dozen ways, patiently, ruthlessly, with a careful kindness that explained procedure and probability and the way a single word can turn a life. Instead, I gave her the only truth that mattered. My job. 2 agents led Ethan past us, and he reached for Rachel's hand. She tried to take it, but her bouquet slipped, blossoms scattering like snow across the runner. The officiant stepped back, forgotten, hands still lifted in the frame of a benediction that never landed. In the earpiece, a groom's suite secure. We have a case, lead shielded. Opening protocol in progress. Proceed, I said. Record everything. Tag and bag. I turned to my mother. Her face had emptied, the practiced social brightness gone, revealing a softer fear beneath. Fear for her daughters, for the room, for the story she had told herself about what families are. Mom, I said gently, please sit. Keep your phone where agents can see it. You're safe. She sank down without argument, and for the first time in years I felt her listen. My father tried another approach. You brought violence into this family, he said. Quieter now, accusation wrapped in disbelief. On Rachel's wedding day. You. I shook my head. They brought it. I'm ending it. He stared at me, wrong-footed by the simplicity. The team leader returned, lifted his visor. Case in the suite contains a shielded assembly, partial components consistent with our brief. AV room had redundant DVRs, but wipe scripts were mid-run. We pulled power in time. Good, I said. Start transport. Split the principals by agency. I want separate chains of custody and no shared holding until counsel is assigned. Understood. I approached the steps to the altar and looked out over the guests, hundreds of faces suddenly porous, the glossy surface of their lives punctured. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, keeping my voice level, you'll be processed as witnesses. Please cooperate with the agents. We'll work as quickly as possible. Somewhere in the room, relief flickered, humans grateful for instructions. The spell of panic loosened. Rachel stood alone in a puddle of petals, mascara a soft grey blur under her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Not angry. Not yet. Just a small, stunned voice that remembered sleepovers and shared secrets, and a skinny kid sister who used to follow her into the waves at Santa Cruz and pretend not to be cold. Because you wouldn't have believed me, I said. And because believing me would have put you in danger. Her chin trembled. I'm in danger now. You were always in danger. In my ear, a transport rolling. Perimeter secure. Last secondary target en route to the South Holding. A pause. Falcon, we found an additional device in the AV cabinet, a data mule. Whoever installed it knew what to pull. Copy. Forensics Priority 1. The team leader glanced at me, waiting for the last piece. Not tactics, narrative. The part where we set the tone that would follow every report, every courtroom, every dinner table reconstruction of what happened at the Carlson wedding. Captain Hayes, he prompted quietly, using the rank my parents never remembered. Statement for the record. I let my eyes rest on the screen one more time, on the red dot that had already gone grey as the sweep was cleared, on the ledger lines that had lived in my head for months, on the room that had been built to bless a future and now held it to account. For the record, EI said, Operation Iron Veil executed as planned. Targets secured without civilian injury. Evidence preserved. Motivation: interdiction of illicit weapons components and protection of U.S. persons. Secondary: disruption of a trafficking network using legitimate events as cover. Tertiary: safeguarding uninvolved family members. He nodded, clicked his MIC, repeated the words. Only then did I let myself look straight at my family, their bewilderment, their hurt, the collapsing scaffolds of all the stories they told about me. I felt the ache of it move through my ribs and settle, not as regret, but as weight properly carried. Escort the bride to the family lounge, I said softly to a nearby agent. She's a witness, not a suspect. Water, privacy, female officer only. As Rachel was guided away, she glanced back. For a heartbeat, her face was 10 years younger, and mine was too. Then the moment passed, and the work resumed. The ballroom was quieter now, though a quiet was relative. The occasional sharp order from an agent or the muffled sob of a guest cut through the hum of tactical radio chatter. The air smelled faintly of spilled champagne, perfume, and the tang of adrenaline. Most of the high-value targets were already in transport vehicles headed to separate holding facilities across the Bay Area. The rest of the guests were corralled into the secondary reception hall, guarded but comfortable, while identification checks continued. I stood at the edge of the altar, scanning the room, committing every detail to memory. Part of it was habit. A debrief runs smoother when you can anticipate the questions, but part of it was personal. This wasn't just another op. It was my family's collision with the reality I'd been living for years. The team leader approached again, visor up now, revealing eyes sharp but not unkind. Captain Hayes, forensics has confirmed the shielded assembly matches the profile from your intel. AV cabinet device was a high-speed solid-state mule, encrypted, but our techs think they can break it before morning. I nodded once. Chain of custody? Solid. Tagged, documented, in bureau transport. From the corner of my eye, I saw Rachel sitting in the family lounge doorway, still in her gown, her hair slipping loose. An agent stood nearby with bottled water and a steady watch. My mother sat beside her, holding one of her hands like she used to hold mine when I'd skinned a knee. I walked toward them. Mom looked up first, eyes red but dry. Emily, is any of this true? I finished for her. Yes. It's been true for a long time. Rachel stared at me, searching my face for the sister she remembered. I thought you were just working some military desk job. You, as she stopped herself, swallowing whatever words were about to follow. I work intelligence, I said evenly. And for 18 months, my team has been tracking your husband's family. What happened today prevented restricted weapons technology from leaving the country and ending up in the hands of people who'd use it. She blinked rapidly. So my wedding was just cover? No. Your wedding was real. The cover was theirs. You just didn't know it. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of it. For once, there was no barb in her tone, no attempt to score points. Just a quiet kind of loss, not of a marriage, but of the story she thought she'd been living. I left them with the agent and headed back toward the command post set up in what had been the code check. Jensen was on the secure line, speaking in his low, precise cadence, but he broke off when he saw me. "Good work, Falcon," he said. "Minimal civilian distress, 0 injuries, all primaries in custody. The DOJ is already drafting preliminary charges." "Any blowback from local PD?" I asked. "They're fine. Your op plan covered their chain of authority. Everyone's impressed." The praise didn't land the way it used to. I'd done my job, yes, exactly as trained, exactly as briefed. But this time, the collateral damage wasn't measured in civilian panic or property disruption. It was measured in the look on my sister's face. 2 hours later, the last guest had been processed and released. Only family remained in the hotel, and even that was about to change. My parents stood together by the ballroom doors, not quite looking at me. My father broke the silence first. "You could have warned us," he said. "You wouldn't have believed me," I replied. He pressed his lips together, as if holding back an argument, then finally said, "We didn't know who you were." "You knew exactly who I was," I said quietly. "You just never wanted to see it." He had no answer for that. By the time I walked out of the Fairmorn Grand, the city was deep in night. Tactical vans idled under the port cosher, exhaust curling into the cool air. I gave the team leader a final nod, slid into the back of a waiting bureau sedan, and let the door close on the wreckage behind me. Through the tinted glass, I saw Rachel step outside, her dress trailing on the concrete, her eyes following the car until it turned the corner. The op was over. The mission had succeeded. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of my mind, I knew nothing in my family would ever be the same again. The sedan's ride back across the bay was silent, save for the low crackle of encrypted radio traffic from the driver's console. I sat with my hands folded loosely in my lap, letting the city lights flicker across the tinted glass. San Francisco slid away behind us, a glittering island of noise and memory, and the dark stretch of the bridge opened in front of us. At Presidio Field Office, the Bureau had secured a conference room for the interagency debrief. When I walked in, the room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer toner, the universal perfume of operations centers. A half-dozen people already sat at the oval table, 2 from the FBI's Counterproliferation Unit, 1 from DHS, an Interpol liaison, and 2 of my own from Army Intelligence. Colonel Jensen was at the head of the table. His face drawn but alert. "Falcon, you'll brief first," he said, sliding a digital recorder across the table. I took my seat and opened my mission log. Operation Iron Veil initiated on my mark at 1,642 hours. Tactical teams entered via pre-designated points Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Primary targets Ethan Carlson and Robert Carlson secured within 45 seconds of breach. Secondary targets apprehended within 8 minutes. No civilian injuries. Evidence seizure in progress at 2 off-site locations identified during the operation. The Interpol liaison, a tall woman with steel-grey hair, leaned forward. "The shielded assembly, confirmed as the prototype trigger?" "Yes," I said, pulling up the photo stills on the shared monitor. "Recovered in groom's suite closet B preliminary radiological sweep negative. Forensic analysis will confirm composition, but dimensions and internal structure match the component we intercepted in Prague 18 months ago." One of the FBI agents whistled under his breath. "That thing's been a ghost for years." "To catch it in country." He shook his head. Hell of a net you threw. Jensen gave him a sharp look. Praise wasn't part of the official record, then turned back to me. Continue. I outlined the capture of the encrypted data mule from the AV cabinet and the secondary seizure of financial ledgers from Robert Carlson's briefcase. Both, I noted, could provide months' worth of follow-up targets. The DHS agent spoke up. Your family, were they aware of your role before tonight? I met his eyes evenly. No. He hesitated. And now? They understand that my presence wasn't optional. I kept my tone neutral, but the silence that followed told me the room understood the weight behind the words. The Interpol liaison broke it. Given the personal connection, do you anticipate any security leaks from your relatives? No. They're shaken enough to stay quiet. And frankly, they wouldn't know where to start. By the time I finished my segment, the clock read nearly 0100. Jensen closed the meeting with a clipped, outstanding work. We'll reconvene once forensics completes their first run. As the others filed out, he motioned for me to stay. Walk with me. We stepped into the cool corridor, our footsteps echoing against the linoleum. You're not going to hear this from anyone else in that room, he said, his voice lower now. You handled tonight with more discipline than most seasoned field officers I've worked with. But I also know what it cost you. I kept my gaze forward. It's part of the job, sir. Maybe. But most people don't have to execute warrants on their sister's wedding. He stopped outside my office door. Don't carry more of it than you have to. That's an order. I nodded, but we both knew orders like that don't stick. Inside my office, I closed the door and sat heavily in my chair. The adrenaline was gone now, leaving a hollow ache in its place. I opened my laptop and began drafting my after-action report, the official version, scrubbed of anything personal. Objective: neutralize Carlson network. Result: success. Casualties: none. Assets recovered: primary component, encrypted data mule, financial ledgers. Follow-up: multi-agency investigation, ongoing. It was clean. Clinical. Exactly what the record needed to be. But as I typed, an image kept intruding. Rachel in her wedding dress, sitting on the carpet with her bouquet scattered in pieces, looking at me like she was meeting a stranger. At 0300, I finally left the office. The halls were empty, the building humming softly with the life of secure servers behind locked doors. Outside, the air was damp and cold, smelling faintly of the ocean. My government-issued sedan waited at the curb, but I didn't get in right away. Instead, I stood there for a moment, looking east toward the barely perceptible glow that would become morning. The operation was over. The network was broken. And yet, in the quiet between missions, I couldn't shake the thought that this had been the easy part. Because cleaning up an armed syndicate was one thing. Cleaning up the Forelight with your own blood, that was another battlefield entirely. The mission code name was already history, buried in classified archives under the cold heading, Iron Veil, complete. But its ripples were still moving through Washington, San Francisco, and a dozen foreign capitals. Back at Army Intelligence HQ in Arlington, my days were now consumed by a different kind of fight, combing through the treasure trove of evidence seized during the operation. The ledgers from Robert Carlson's briefcase alone had opened 23 new investigative threads. The encrypted data mule was still being unraveled by cyberforensics, each decrypted file another piece of a spiderweb stretching across borders. And yet, for all the professional noise, there was a personal silence that sat heavier. My phone had not rung once with a family number I recognized. No texts. No emails. Just absence. Until the morning of the 6th week. I was at my desk, reviewing an intelligence brief on a newly identified shell corporation in Nevada linked to the Carlson network, when my secure work phone buzzed. It was an encrypted relay, a message routed through multiple scrubbing servers to hide the origin. The name displayed was one I hadn't seen in weeks: Mom. The message was short. Rachel isn't speaking to us. She blames us for everything. Please call. We don't understand. I stared at it for a long moment. I'd imagined this in a dozen different ways since the wedding. Anger, accusations, maybe even some grudging acknowledgement of why I'd done what I'd done. But this was confusion. A plea from people who still hadn't grasped the depth of the truth they'd been living alongside for years. For a second, I felt the old reflex, the need to explain myself, to bridge the gap, to soften the blow for them. But that instinct was weaker now, like a muscle that had atrophied. I'd spent my whole life trying to make them see me. Maybe it was time to accept they never would. I archived the message without replying. That afternoon, I was summoned to the top-floor conference suite. Colonel Jensen was already there, standing beside a massive digital map of Europe and the United States overlaid with red, green, and yellow markers. Sit, he said, gesturing to the table. The Interpol liaison was there too, as well as 2 senior analysts from NATO's Eastern Europe desk. The air in the room was sharper, not tense, but charged, like before a thunderstorm. Jensen tapped a marker on the map. Everything in red here is a direct takedown from Iron Veil intelligence. Green are active investigations. Yellow is potential intelligence that still needs confirmation. Total arrests, 129 across 9 countries. Assets seized, 28 shell corporations dismantled, 34 bank accounts frozen. You didn't just hit a limb, Hayes, you cut off the head. The NATO analyst slid a new file toward me. You've been promoted. Effective immediately, you're running the entire Eastern European desk. You'll have a full team: linguists, field officers, cyber specialists. Your operational reach just tripled. I let out a slow breath. It was the kind of career leap most officers waited a decade for. And I'd earned it, but the cost was still fresh in my mind. When I moved into my new office the next day, it didn't feel like a promotion so much as a transfer of battlefields. The space was larger, with a panoramic view of the Potomac, and the walls were lined with real-time feeds, satellite images, intercepted comms, logistical maps. My team, handpicked from across the Alliance, wasted no time. In our first briefing, we tore through 3 concurrent cases, each analyst presenting data like they were placing ammunition on a table. There were no dismissive smiles here, no undercurrents of doubt. When I spoke, they listened, not because they had to, but because they trusted my judgment. This, I thought, was what family was supposed to feel like, not blood ties, but mutual respect and shared purpose. One evening, as I was reviewing satellite imagery of a suspected shipment route out of Odessa, my phone buzzed again. Not the secure line, my personal one. A single new message. Emily, it's Dad. We're worried about your sister. She's or not herself. Maybe you could just talk to her? She doesn't have anyone right now. No accusations this time. Just a request. I set the phone down and stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to pick it up, dial his number, and try, one last time, to make them understand. But the truth was, my battlefield had shifted. My fight wasn't with my family anymore. I turned back to the map on the wall, to the mission still unfolding in red and yellow markers. Out there were lives I could still protect. And somewhere in San Francisco, my sister had her own choices to make. It was a Thursday night when the line I'd drawn for myself started to blur. The operations floor was quiet, the overhead lights dimmed to save energy. I was alone in my office, reviewing a multi-agency dossier on a suspected shipment route from Varna, Bulgaria, to Newark. My personal phone, usually silent in this building, buzzed on the desk. The caller ID stopped me cold. Rachel. For a moment, I just stared at it. 6 weeks of silence. 6 weeks of knowing she'd seen me not as a sister, but as the woman who had detonated her wedding in front of hundreds of guests. And now she was calling me at 10:14 p.m. I answered on the fourth ring. Rachel. There was a pause, long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, I didn't know who else to call. Her voice was hoarse, smaller than I remembered. I leaned back in my chair. Are you safe? Another pause. I don't know. That set alarms ringing in my head, the kind you learn not to ignore. Where are you? I moved out of Mom and Dad's. I'm in a rental in Oakland. But I think someone's been following me. At first I thought I was imagining it, but there was a car outside 2 nights in a row. And someone jiggled the handle on my front door yesterday. I pulled a notepad toward me. Describe the car. She exhaled sharply. Emily, I'm not calling for an investigation. I wanted to hear your voice. Rachel, if someone's targeting you because of the Carlson case. That's the thing, is she cut in? I think it's not about Ethan. I think it's about me. About what I know. Within an hour, I had one of our local field officers stationed outside her place under the guise of a parked delivery van. I told Rachel it was just to ease my mind, but the truth was, if any loose threads from the Carlson network were still dangling, she'd be an obvious target. Jensen wasn't thrilled when I briefed him the next morning. She's a civilian, Falcon. You can't wrap her in official resources just because she's your sister. She's a civilian who was married into an arms trafficking family, I countered. That makes her a potential intelligence asset and a potential liability. He studied me for a long moment, then said, fine. But this is your leash to hold. If it tangles, you answer for it. The following week, Rachel called again. This time she sounded different. Steadier. I've been thinking, she said. About that day. About the things you said. And about the things Ethan said to his father before the ceremony. I remember more now than I realized. I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch until she filled it. They were talking about a second route. Ethan asked if the Jersey shipment was locked in. Robert told him it was fine as long as the switch in the bay went through first. I sat forward. Bay as in San Francisco Bay? I guess. But he didn't say. And Emily, her voice dropped lower. I'm not telling you this because I want to be involved. I I don't want any more people to get hurt because I didn't say something. By the next morning, that fragment of conversation had turned into a lead, one that tied an unmarked warehouse in Newark to a shipping container due to arrive from Oakland in less than 4 weeks. It was a reminder that even broken links in a chain could still hold vital information. I didn't tell Rachel the details, but I did call her. "What you remembered was useful," EI said. "Thank you." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you hate me for everything before? For how I treated you?" I thought about all the years of casual jabs, the spar weekends that outranked my graduations, the pitying smiles. And I realized something surprising. I didn't. I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. "No," EI said simply. "I don't." There was a soft sound on the other end, not quite relief, but something close. "Okay," she said. "That's good." A week later, I got an internal memo from Interpol confirming the seizure of the Newark-bound container. It held 3 more shielded assemblies, smaller than the one from the wedding but no less dangerous. The credit line in the report was blunt. Lead provided by civilian witness, Rachel Hayes. I printed it and set it in my desk drawer, not for the record, but for me. Proof that sometimes, even in the most fractured families, you could still find a point of connection strong enough to hold under pressure. 3 weeks after Rachel's late-night call, the bay switch she'd overheard was no longer just a fragment of memory. It was the centerpiece of a joint op that spanned from the Port of Oakland to the warehouses along the New Jersey waterfront. I was standing in the mobile command center parked 2 blocks from the docks, headset on, eyes on 3 separate live feeds. Out beyond the steel walls, the night smelled like salt, diesel, and rain that hadn't quite decided whether to fall. The Port of Oakland was a restless machine, cranes swinging, containers stacking, the low grind of freight trucks rolling in and out. "Falcon, Alpha team in position," it came the voice of the field lead. "Bravo in position," another voice followed. "Charlie set," a third chimed in. "Copy all," EI said. "We move on my mark." Rachel's tip had pointed us to a container registered under a shell company we'd already linked to the Carlson's Nevada front. Inside, according to intercepted manifests, was the agricultural machinery. In reality, the satellite scans and sniffers told a different story. Lead-lined crates inside the shipment, too small for farm equipment and too heavy for anything legal. Our goal tonight was simple in theory: intercept, secure, and document before the container left port. But ports are rabbit warrens of moving parts, and a single spooked worker or curious bystander could compromise the whole operation. "Mark," EI said, and the teams moved. From my monitor, I watched Alpha advance between 2 stacked rows of containers, the shadows swallowing their black uniforms. Bravo split to flank the target from the waterside, cutting off any attempt to move it onto a vessel. Charlie blended with actual port workers, hard hats and all, until they were close enough to swing into action. In the camera's green glow, the container doors swung open under bolt cutters. The first crate came into view, stenciled with a fake brand name in peeling white letters. A pry bar bit into the wood, the lid groaning in protest before splitting wide. "Visual confirmation," the lead said. "Shielded assemblies, 3 units. Matches the wedding seizure." I exhaled slowly. "Copy. Proceed with evidence protocol." 20 minutes later, the assemblies were secured in a Bureau transport vehicle, the container doors sealed under federal lock. The op was a clean sweep, no injuries, no alarms, just the quiet, methodical removal of something that should never have been on US soil. But the real twist came not from the crates, but from the manifests we found taped to the inside of the container door. They listed 3 more shipments. 2 had already left the port, bound for Chicago and Miami. 1 was still here, under a different shell company name, scheduled to depart in 36 hours. Back at HQ, Jensen reviewed the intel in silence for nearly a full minute before saying, "You realize what this means?" "It's a distribution chain," EI said. The wedding wasn't the finale. It was the middle of the operation. "Which means," he replied, "you're not done yet." I didn't get home until 0300, but I called Rachel anyway. She answered groggily. "Emily? Is something wrong?" "No. I just thought you'd want to know. What you told me about the bay saved a lot more than you realize." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad," as she said finally. "I don't want to be part of that world anymore. But I guess I already am. In a way." "You're part of mine now," EI said. The next day, we started planning the Chicago and Miami interceptions. Those ops would be led by other teams, but the intel would flow through my desk. It wasn't just about weapons components anymore. The network was smuggling encrypted data drives, unregistered drone parts, even counterfeit currency. It was the kind of sustained, coordinated dismantling that could keep my team busy for months. And it all traced back, in some way, to a wedding in San Francisco where my sister thought I'd just been a playing soldier. The final operation in the chain wasn't glamorous. No grand ballroom. No glittering chandeliers or shocked wedding guests. Just a warehouse on the edge of Miami's industrial district, humid air heavy with the scent of oil, salt water, and rust. By the time I arrived, the perimeter was already sealed. The local Joint Task Force, FBI, DHS, Miami PD, had the place locked down tighter than a vault. Inside, the cargo was stacked floor to ceiling, shrink-wrapped pallets of e-auto parts and marine equipment. We both knew those labels were fiction. The shielded assemblies in this shipment were smaller, modular components meant to be smuggled piecemeal and reassembled elsewhere. But they were still lethal in the wrong hands. The techs moved with practiced precision, documenting each crate, logging serial numbers, tagging everything for transfer to a secure federal site. When the last crate was loaded into the transport truck, the lead agent gave me a nod. "That's it, Captain Hayes. Chains broken." Back in Arlington 2 weeks later, the Eastern European desk was buzzing with the aftermath. Our ops in Oakland, Newark, Chicago, and Miami had cut the trafficking network down to splinters. Interpol and NATO partners were sweeping up the remnants overseas. Arrest numbers climbed daily, and for once, the briefings were more about what we'd stopped than what we still couldn't touch. Jensen stopped by my office late in the day, leaning against the doorframe. "Congratulations," he said simply. "You've closed a file that's been open for nearly a decade." I didn't say a thank you. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because we both knew it wasn't just my win, it belonged to every analyst, every agent, every field officer who touched the case. Still, I let the words settle. That night, as I was packing up to leave, my phone buzzed again. "Rachel." I answered on the second ring. "They told me on the news," she said. "That it's over." "Is it?" "It's never completely over," I said, "but the network's gone. The people who could hurt you, most of them are in custody." She let out a slow breath. I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding. That I was in danger all along. I didn't believe you then. I do now. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable this time, just full. I'm sorry, Emily, she said at last. For all the years I treated you like you were less. You were carrying more than I could imagine. For a moment, I almost fell back into the old reflex, to brush it off, say it didn't matter. But it did matter. I know, I said quietly. And I accept it. A week later, I met her for coffee at a small cafe in Berkeley. No uniforms, no surveillance vans parked outside. Just two sisters, a table by the window, and mugs that steamed in the morning light. She told me she was taking a leave from her job, thinking about moving to a quieter city. I told her about the promotion, the team, the work that still lay ahead. When we parted, she hugged me, not the polite, social hug I'd grown used to from her, but something closer to what we'd had as kids. It wasn't a magic fix. It didn't erase the years between us. But it was real. Back at HQ, I stood in front of the massive digital map in my office. The red markers from Iron Vale had all shifted to green, completed operations. The only yellow dots now were on unrelated cases, new challenges already forming. I thought about the girl my family once called the quiet one, either a desk job soldier, either one who could never measure up. She didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never had, maybe she'd just been Falcon all along. Waiting for her arena. The world outside my window was already moving toward the next fight. And so was I. As I turned back to my desk, my phone buzzed one last time, a text from Rachel. Whatever comes next, I've got your back now. I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. Not because I needed her approval anymore, but because, for the first time, we were standing on the same side of the battlefield. And that was enough.